If it's an area you use often, you can also take like a steel pipe or something and pound it in the ground, like 4 feet away, just in the grass randomly, and just have it as an entanglement opportunity. So anything getting caught there can just wrap around that pole and cinch up and get pinned down.
When we were testing those disposable anchors for snares, I couldn't believe it. I was out with Marty, we were out near the Cypress Hills, and there were some cactuses that these cows had gone through. A thick bunch of cactuses. I don't know why they'd walk through those cactuses, but there was a cow trail going through there. And Marty had 5 snares set in a row, and I bet you there wasn't 25, 30 yards from the first snare to the last snare, and there's a coyote caught in every one of those snares. Mm-hmm. And the only thing we figured was one got caught and killed. The other one didn't want to get his face in those cactus, so he jumped over it and went to the next one and got caught. You know, like, so try different things. If somebody tells you something's not going to work, take notes, try it, see what works, what doesn't work. What works for me on my trap line might work a little different for you on yours, right?
Yeah.
I've had so many people email me and send me stuff. Well, what would you do on my trap line for this or that? I can't tell you unless I've been there. And what I might do on that trap line might be totally something that different than what Duncan's going to work, but you might have the same results. So,
I want to just elaborate on the snare stuff real quickly, because it's probably not a slide. Do you mind flicking the light there? So this is my kind of technique, but it's, well, I mean, this is just my take on it. So I guess if yours is different, Ken, you can share yours. So I think we're probably fairly similar on this. So we talked about snare height, snare size, all that, like those were points there. I just want to give a bit more of an elaboration on that. So if, when you're walking around and trying to set your snare, when we build the snares, we'll kind of put a bit more emphasis on this. We'll talk about setting up a bait site. But as you're walking around and looking for your spot, you want to look for a trail you're going to see cutting through, see the trail. Now look for a good tree you can anchor to that's close enough for that trail to work with, and then approach that and set up. But when you're now kind of over your spot and setting up, we've got our big tree here we're going to anchor to, and our trail, let's say, is right here. Kind of just cutting in like that, okay? Actually, let's do this. We're in the snow, and here's our trail, more snow like that. Everyone keeping up with that? Okay. I'm just going to grab another felt to make this easy. I have a black one. So your snare, this is really important if you understand. Ken was kind of mentioning their eyes in that, silhouettes and colors and things. In the middle part of their any real predator's eye, let's call it, because not all eyes are the same. You've got your central vision, and then you've got your peripheral vision, right? The peripheral is more reactive. You can't focus on any one thing specifically, but you can catch glimpses of things quicker in your peripheral than you can your direct vision in the central vision, okay? Wolves have very, very acute central vision that's meant for looking a bit further away, okay? So they don't necessarily notice your trap or the snare or anything close up. Like they're really meant for, because they're hunting things that are going to notice them from further out, right? Like everything is oriented for dealing with things from further away. So when you are setting up your snare, it is really critical. One, you're not silhouetting, which is what Ken was talking about, where you have, you're set in a tree line and then it's wide open field behind you. You got clear white snow and then snare, so you can just see the whole perfect line perfectly. Those things just don't exist in the bush, and they're very obvious when you have very clean, smooth, perfect shapes, right? The geometric shapes stand up all the time in the bush. Like 90 degrees, you don't find it, right? So apart from that, if you're cutting down a trail, it's really important that your snare is dead set over the middle of that trail, not just because of their feet and their chin bumping it. Like there's branches and stuff in the bush. They don't mind doing a little maneuvering around. But the bigger deal is actually their peripheral vision, kind of like, think of it as like draw a little cone off the trail like that. And if your snare breaks that peripheral vision, they haven't even looked at it. They're not even thinking twice. It's just a reactionary movement of the head because it's a branch, and these are things they come into all the time. So if you are offset on a trail, it's really common that they'll just pass through quickly and duck or kick under, and not even because they even recognize it's a snare. It's just literally that you ended up breaking that peripheral plane, and it's just an instant movement for them. It's a reactionary thing. Okay? So that's really important you get on that point. And that, to what Ken was kind of talking about, doesn't necessarily mean being right dead set over this point over top of the snare, because you actually want to take a step back and look at what are they overall seeing as they're passing through here. For example, let's say you've got a trail that's going along, and then there's kind of like a tree that's broken off that kind of like juts around. And so the trail kind of does that. You know, we've all kind of run into that before. The overall way the animal is looking is straight through like that. So when they're cutting this corner, they're not hitting 90 degrees solid, and making a turn. They're almost going to be cutting these corners because directionally it makes sense. So your snare, you kind of want to play to that effect as well. Does everyone get what I'm saying there? And often, these are places where you can snare because it's just a pinch point. There's usually a feature or a thing right there. So it's really common. These little jut around, hop over, just some random thing is there. You just have to understand what that's doing with the head as well. Lastly, I just wanted to mention height of the snare off the ground. So this height, if you read in the manual or the magazine, it's about 10 to 12 inches for a coyote, I think 14 to 16 for a wolf. In my mind, that's low, okay? And I think that that's a very accurate number for what the animal is naturally running at through the bush. If you just hit pause mid-movement, took a ruler out, that's probably pretty spot on. But in my mind, most animal or wolves, when they're running through the bush, we wolf specific, their neck isn't up and oriented like that. And we already know we want to be up here on the neck. A good high catch for a good fast kill with a snare. The main reason being is all the muscles down here. There's a lot less muscle here. You can do a very easy experiment and just squeeze top and bottom. You'll note high is significantly more uncomfortable, okay? So if we want to get them to expose that, their natural position being pretty straight, if they're going through a snare straight, where do you think the bottom of the snare is making contact on the body? Yeah, it's hitting right here. That's a low catch, right? So my honest assessment is that the numbers we give you in the manual on that set you up for that type of a catch more often than not. What you want to do is get them to elevate their chin just that couple inches and have that snare just skimming the underside to get that nice and high on the neck. And the way I do that is I like little chin, we call them chin sticks, but stick is the wrong term. It should be like shrubbery, soft, bendable, not a dry poplar branch. Like the test basically is, if this is the chin stick, you should be able to do this comfortably. If it can't pass that, the animal isn't going to allow it under their chin either. It's a simple way to think of it, right? So what I typically like to do is just have a little shrub kind of come out and just hang out just over the underside of the snare. And I like to visualize, so a lot of people I find visualize an animal with the nose going through the middle of the snare. Well, that has this snare, if that's the nose, hitting again low neck. I call that bullseyeing, which you don't want to do. Okay, don't bullseye. You want to visualize that animal's chin just above the bottom of the snare, and we can instigate that with a couple little shrubs just to get that chin up and exposed. And you can have a nice big loop. It doesn't need to be a tight loop. And that initial contact really, I think, is everything nowadays because the gear is going to do the rest of the work from there.
Duncan, when you have a wolf that comes into the snare, you see by the tracks that it backs up.
Yeah.
Is it picking up the size of the snare from its peripheral vision, do you think?
Can be. It can also be you might have a cam lock froze out that then thawed out on you. So really pay attention to your weather patterns, because the cam locks are bad for freezing out. I would recommend, especially down south here, putting drops of glycerin on all of the inside the hinges to make sure that doesn't happen. Also, it's possible, so when you have a snare loop, sorry, I'll draw over here where you can all see better.
And then in this situation, Duncan never even touched the snare.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't
so when you also have a snare loop, if they didn't touch it, it's possible they did that. It's also possible they smelt it. The most common is if you did everything right, then you just took too long to do it. And literally being there too long, you'll leave smell. And if these are wise wolves, that can be enough. So if that wasn't the factor, if it wasn't frozen, height and everything was good. One of the other possibilities is that they were going through, sorry, before I get to that point. So the one previous is if you're visualizing them here, you'll note that you actually need a little bit bigger loop than you would otherwise, because they're a bit pinched here, and you want to make sure there's room for the whiskers and both ears to pass through without contact whatsoever. So assuming all of that was the case, which it sounds like, then most common in my experience is that it was a juvenile or a 2-year-old, a subadult, and there was an alpha whatever behind it that recognized the scene, probably smelt something, and called it off. And maybe even at the very last instance just happened to catch a glimpse of the snare or something. But there was something that cued him, probably smell-based. It's probably it, and just got unlucky with the swirl of wind. But otherwise, if it wasn't frozen. And it got called off by not it, but the one behind it. Yeah. Because I've had that happen a couple of times too. And you could see, I was lucky enough, I had really good clean tracks of the one behind. And based on like their distance where they went through it, you could see it stopped before the one in front of it did. And it seemed, that's where I kind of made the assumption, I'm pretty confident of it, that it stopped, it chirped the other one before it continued, and that's where the distance suddenly kind of expanded. Then it stopped and they both backed out. So that was where I've had that kind of exact situation, so that may have been it.
In this situation, it was a single wolf.
Just a single, yeah.
Stopped, backed up,
Yeah.
actually walked around it. I think it saw it at the last.
Yeah. The other possibility is you just go hard with smells and some stink containers and really pull some curiosity that's going to get their mind somewhere else. But that's where it's like you got to hit the right mix. They got to, everyone's like got their own jam, right? So.
Did you like this video? If you did, I think you're gonna like this one right over here. So check it out. And I appreciate your subscribing if you haven't done so already. Remember to do that while you're watching this next video. Click like, it all helps us out for this channel. Catch you next time.